Welcome back to the Glazov Gang. I'm Anne-Marie Murrell, National Director, Editor-in-Chief of Politichicks.tv, and I am with the wonderful Dwight Schultz and the equally wonderful John Duffy. And we're here fighting crime.
We're talking about radicalism and craziness in this world. It's so hard to, we were talking earlier, it's by the time you get to one news item, another one comes on, and it just piles and piles and piles, and it doesn't stop. And there's so much news that's so important that isn't getting out there to the world. So one of the problems, one thing that very few people are talking about is the persecution of Christians throughout the world. It's getting worse and worse. And I'm shocked that churches aren't stepping up. Just nobody's stepping up. Raymond Ibrahim wrote this wonderful article. It's called Confirmed, U.S. Chief Facilitator of Christian Persecution. And according to 2014 World Watch List, these are countries that are the worst in the world. Syria is third worst, Iraq fourth, Afghanistan fifth, Libya 13th. 3 of the 4 of these were liberated, thanks to the United States. And Syria, which used to be a lot more religiously tolerant as Syria could be, is now one of the worst in the world. Leila Gilbert wrote an article called Syria's Christians, Who Will Help Them? Mass graves have been found in Christian villages. Priests and clergy have been abducted, tortured, killed, and a dozen nuns in a small village in Syria are still being held, and who knows what's happening to these people. Dwight, why is there no public outcry and outrage? And did the United States, did we open this door?
Of course we did.
For this?
Of course we did. The President of the United States brought the Muslim Brotherhood to sit in front of him when he gave his great speech in Egypt. He opened the door to them and he brought them into our government. The Muslim Brotherhood, which had its roots with the murder of Sadat, with Zawahiri, going back, and Andy McCarthy's great book, A Grand Jihad, which chronicles the discovery of the Muslim Brotherhood's desire to overthrow the United States of America. That's their goal. That's their grand jihad. And even now, in the Egyptian newspapers, they gloat. Well, at least this was when, before the military retook the country. But the Brotherhood, they have actual people in our government. And Steve Emerson today, there was an article today, Steve Emerson has gotten some documents through the Freedom of Information Act. There was a particular person, although the name they can't find, who brought members of the Muslim Brotherhood into the United States without going through TSA. Because they were special people. People who swear to destroy.
Where can people find that article?
And the Investigative Project on Terrorism. Steve Emerson, investigativproject.com.
This is terrifying.
It is terrifying. And when Michelle Bachmann and Louis Gohmert and others tried to bring out the fact that our illustrious Secretary of State had a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, Brother Sisterhood, Abedin, right there, right next to her, she was called, and they were called terrible names by none other than John Boehner and the great John McCain.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an astonishing situation in which we have to sit back and watch our government subverted, really, and no one seems to mind or say anything about it.
There's a documentary that is up for an Academy Award called The Square, and what it's about is about the quote-unquote Arab Spring in Egypt. And the documentary starts out, the person who made it, it's up for the Academy Award, starts out with following these, I'll call them naive, but secular young people who were protesting in the square in Egypt. And there's a relationship between one of the protesters and one of the Muslim Brotherhood. And as the documentary and as the reality of what happened in Egypt happens, the documentary shows the brutality and the horribleness of the Muslim Brotherhood. And it really exposes them, and it's an excellent documentary on that side. It also shows the naiveness of the secular leftists in Egypt who thought that they were just going to overthrow the government, and then the Muslim Brotherhood was going to just, step away and let them run a democratic country. So that, and that kind of reminded me, I was involved as a radical back in, and this will date me, but I was involved at the protests against the Shah of Iran when he met with Jimmy Carter back in 1977 before they overthrew the Shah. And it's a very similar situation where the U.S. government looked at Egypt and thought that the Muslim Brotherhood was better than what existed under our government, just like Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter at least wasn't even as dumb as that, because he was at least trying to have a relationship with the Shah, and Khomeini came in. But that's always what happens, is the radicals overthrow what exists, and instead of it being better, it's always worse. Same thing in Cambodia, Pol Pot. Pol Pot came in, and supposedly the dictator before him was bad, but compared to Pol Pot, he was the best thing that they ever had. So each time that happens, and our government in particular facilitated that because they believed that the Muslim Brotherhood, and they still believe, should play a positive role. And they won't, and they never will. And that's not who they are.
Well, Noni Darwish has said that Egypt can have 500 revolutions, but as long as the majority of the people continue voting in and supporting Sharia law, which they still do, it's never going to change.
This is the perfect example of it. Qaradawi was the one who came in at the end. He's the father of the Muslim Brotherhood now. I mean, he's the grandfather. And they were all waiting for him to come into the square at the very end, and there were 1 million people there, I think. But when they pushed all the the secularists aside, because the secularists they're the useful idiots. They're the useful idiots. They did what the Muslim Brotherhood wanted them to do, and then they were shut. They were put out. And that's what the communists did. And they are all really totalitarians. And that's the great thing in Andy McCarthy's book. He makes the great comparison. It shows you how Qaradawi and Qutb and all that loved communism, except it was godless. That's all. So you have communism with a god, and you can murder, and you can kill, and you control. And that was the perfect example. That's why the military did what they did. And then, of course, the people saw that this was not a good deal. So just like in the United States with the healthcare, people finally do, when they're oppressed, push back if they have the opportunity, and the Muslim Brotherhood didn't have enough weapons to squelch what was going on in Egypt. And so now they're threatening, I don't know whether you saw, Morsi's wife was threatening to expose Barack Obama for all the help that he has given.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, yes. And she mentioned Abadan, by the way. I'm wondering if there's going to be a public trial with that kind of threat. Interesting.
All right, he's a political prisoner. He's an American political prisoner, but he doesn't have a name like Kardashian or something fun, like Beyonce. Pastor Saeed Abedini has been in an Iranian prison now for 2 years. His wife has come out. She just released a statement saying that no high official has contacted her as of yet in 2 years about the release of her husband. She's going to do a prayer vigil in front of the White House, which basically is going to result in probably arrest. You're not supposed to do that. If you're holding a sign, it's okay, but you're not supposed to stand and pray for extended amount of time. But she's hoping to get arrested so that she'll be able to hopefully talk to Barack Obama, who, of course, he made the phone call to, I can't remember, the basketball player Jason Collins. After he came out as being gay, he got a personal phone call from Barack, and so did Sandra Fluke when she came out as a slut. Sorry, but it's the truth.
No, it is
he
true.
called those two people, and yet he's not calling an American political prisoner's wife, and they're making no efforts to release him. John, why do you think that could possibly be? Is there any good excuse that you can think of why he wouldn't call her?
Good is one thing. I mean, the bottom line of it, it's not important to him in the sense of what is important is trying to create this relationship with Iran, this illusionary relationship that somehow, and it's a constant belief that somehow that if you're nice to totalitarians or Islamic fundamentalists, that somehow they become nice to you. And it's a belief that somehow we're going to all get along. If you just give them what they want, eventually, they'll moderate. and it's not true, and this guy is just an individual, and he's expendable to him. It's not about principle, it's not about doing the right thing, it's about doing what's important to you politically, and this guy, if he dies, is not important. It's just not important.
But it would be important if he was Bill Robertson of Duck Dynasty, right?
Well, look, he's a Christian, and so therefore he's expendable. And Barack Obama's not a Christian. I mean, he pretends...
But okay, why isn't the rest of the country, though?
The rest of the country,
gathering
Christianity,
behind
the Christian churches, the leftist churches, which is what they are. They were. A few weeks ago, when the Elian Gonzalez thing came up, and I said I was involved in the Methodist Church at the time, who were facilitators to take Elian Gonzalez back to the devil, back to the God that he now says he worships, Fidel Castro. I found that to be an extraordinary thing. They weren't saying anything about the murder of Christians around the world. And here was a kid whose mother died saving him, and this denomination in the leftist churches of America, the radical leftist churches of America, and there was a lot of tension in that church, by the way, the Methodist Church, about this kind of thing. They wanted him back with Castro and with communism, and they saw nothing about the heart of their religion, saving the soul and believing in God and bringing this child into a Christian world. It was not there, and the churches were never to speak out. They're scared to death. They don't want their throats cut. Not here in this country. They don't want their throats cut. They don't want to be burned. They see what's going on around the rest of the world, and they're scared to death. They don't have a great deal of courage. A few do, but not many. And even getting the Catholic Church to stand up. But now this Pope has at least made a few comments about it, but they're scared to death of radical Islam. Scared to death. And that's why Christians are on the list of why the Obama government put Christians high, along with returning veterans, high up on the list of radicals in this country, and not Islamists.
Iran. There's a new article on Front Page Magazine, Joseph Klein, and it's called "The Surrender to Iran Begins." Yeah. The mainstream media, the Obama administration, they are declaring peace on earth. They have obliterated Iran's nuclear program. Everything is perfect and wonderful. The problem is that Iran is also celebrating, and they also believe that they have won a big, giant victory. One of the former deputy director said that it would take about 2 to 3 weeks to have enough uranium hexafluoride high enriched for one single weapon. So, Dwight, is Iran fooling us, or
listen,
what's
they make no
here?
bones about it. They're out laughing about how they've snuggered us for 10 years. And wasn't the headline on Drudge today was the Iranian foreign minister said, the president's got this wrong. We're not stopping anything.
Yeah.
And they're doing it right into they are making us look like fools, the West look like fools. They've been doing it for 10 years. It's so clear. The North Koreans did it earlier. And they're working with the North Koreans, too, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
So the North Koreans did it. Now the Iranians are doing it, and they're laughing. And, of course, you have Valerie Jarrett and the president who are accommodating and anything to make the United States weaker, because they have no interest in American power around the world. So from their standpoint, they are succeeding. And this is the thing that most Americans, even now, don't. And I think this is why they're starting not to like Barack Obama, because the American people are beginning to see he doesn't like the United States. And that's really the core of his policy.
John, do you think it's that? Do you think it's that nefarious? Or is this just that he has been snookered? I like that word.
I don't think it's snookered. I think it's because it's real clear. The Iranians came out today and said, the Americans are saying that this is what we agreed to, but this is not what we agreed to. So, they believe they agreed to something else, and it's not what we want, which is that we're going to stop them from building nuclear weapons. Basically, they said, we're not going to stop doing anything. So their interpretation is probably more valid, and the U.S. interpretation is what they need to sell us so that people don't get upset. That why Congress won't pass any more restrictions on Iran. It's why the president's working so hard to prevent Congress from passing those restrictions on Iran. But even Saudi Arabia and other countries are calling for that because they realize that Iran is a major threat to the world. And you're not going to accomplish by pulling them back, by appeasing them. Appeasement doesn't work, didn't work back in World War II, and it'll never work. Appeasement isn't a strategy of success.
Right.
And so everybody's saying that, but we're going to keep applying that strategy of appeasement and see how far that takes us.
That's right. It's laughable. It really is laughable. You know, the president says one thing, the foreign minister of Iran says, no, that's not true. We're not, and we're looking forward to the $4 billion that we're going to get from you now. I mean, they're running around the world, and the
we
Israelis
just trust them,
and we are making it far more likely that the Israelis are going to have to do something to protect themselves, and the Saudis and the rest of them. They all see it. They all know, and why the media in this country is complicit in this. Whatever happens, they too are at fault. They are one with this administration. They were through Benghazi to the healthcare situation. I mean, you see the documents that just came out about. Even the administration said this could be the destruction of the healthcare industry. I mean, by March. Yeah. Although openly they've been saying just the opposite. It's the same with this. Everything that they do, the end of everything, of all of the policies, the bonfires all throughout the Mideast, burning everywhere, the healthcare plan burning, our economy burning. Every policy that this administration has brought to the fore ends up with casualties, and the casualties are all us. And it's predictable, just very predictable right now. And the American people are, unfortunately, the victims.
Do you think they're going to wake up in time to see this?
Who is they, the American people?
The American people. It's our fault.
Well, it ain't a question of whether, I mean, you know, the people are seeing stuff. You know, it comes down to, you know, in another year there's going to be an election. Hopefully that's going to shift power a little bit. And then in 2 years after that there's going to be another election. But whether you're woke up or not, it all comes down to how the elections get played out and whether shifts can get made. And that's where it comes down at the end of the day. You got to win. You got to win elections. You got to be able to shift policies and create new policies. And until that happens, whether you're awake or not, you're still powerless. You're still powerless because the government has the power.
He's president for 3 more years.
Yeah, whether we like it or not.
At least.
And even though
so many rumors
don't say. Wait a minute. Don't say that.
We're not going to go there. But that's what they're saying.
even someone on the left, Village Voice, writer for many years, Nat Hentoff, he's called for his impeachment. So it's like, which is kind of funny, you know. But on the other hand, of course, it's never going to happen. So that's kind of a waste of time. But it's just interesting that someone on the far left would be the person who's like really out there starting to wage a campaign around it, which is interesting.
Hentoff and Michelle Bachmann are on the same page. That this president is lost.
Kind of ironic.
Right. It is. It is at this point. It really is. Yeah.
Well, we got to wrap this up, but I want to end this on something that Daniel Greenfield wrote because it's beautiful. And you mentioned Israel, and with Ariel Sharon, we still didn't get around to talking. This is the second show I've hosted that I haven't got to mention his death and his legacy. But I do want to read this real quick. Israel in Twilight by Daniel Greenfield. Israel cannot afford to exist in twilight. If it were in a peaceful part of the world, if its people were not murderously hated by billions, if it were not constantly at war, it might be able to move through an undistinguished prosperity without worry or doubt. But that is not its fate. The Jewish state cannot persist in twilight. It will either fall into the darkness of an old night or step into the light of a new day. Daniel Greenfield, man, beautiful. You're brilliant. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope we've saved the world. Thank you for watching. Hopefully Jamie will be back next week, so stay tuned.